So at this moment in time, you can actually see my slides because I can see them as well. I just need to swap presenter views. There we go. So one of the things we're looking at is how different is 701 from 601. Now, what I've been doing, I've been teaching 701 since February this year, and I've been doing this every single week. And I want to give you guys an idea of what you need to do to prepare for the exam. How does that sound, Jeffrey?
Sounds awesome.
Because at the moment, nobody knows how they must prepare for it. Now, what's happened here, you've got the Security Plus 601 equivalent, threats, attacks, vulnerabilities, architecture, design, implementation, operations and incident response, and they've got governance, risk, and compliance. Well, what's happened in 701, they've changed some of the parts. The threats, attacks, and vulnerabilities has gone down to 22%. They've got general security concepts, and this is actually basically 4 modules. Threats, attacks, and vulnerabilities is 5 modules. Then you've got security architecture, which is about 4 modules. Then they've got what they changed. They started off with a thing called security operations. And the thing about security operations, it's 28% of your exam. And the reason why it's 28% of your exam, it's 9 different modules. And then what you've got a new one in there, which is Objective 5, Security Programs Management and actually Oversight, and that's worth 20%. Now, if we look at the general concepts, it's got 4 basic things. It includes various types of security controls, fundamental security concepts, the importance of change management processes, and also using cryptographic solutions. Now, this change management is new, and that comes into chapter 3 in my book, and it's very, very simple. It's the most simple thing you've got. With cryptographic solutions, they seem to have dumbed this down, and they've made it a lot easier. Then what's happened here, it says understanding cybersecurity terminology and core concepts essential to cybersecurity work. Then what you've got, the threats, vulnerabilities, and mitigations. You've got threat actors and motivation. You've got threat vectors and attack services, types of vulnerabilities, and mitigation techniques and indicators of malicious activity. Now, this is 5 objectives, and it's 22% of your exam. For those that have got my book, the main chapters for this are chapters 6, 7, and 8, because a cybersecurity professional should be aware of attacks and vulnerabilities, and they need to identify the types of attacks. And the good thing about this is the exam, I believe, is actually an easier exam than 601. I think it's gone down to Bloom's 3 from Bloom's 4. Then you've got security architecture. You must be aware of attacks, threats, and vulnerabilities and their impact. You need to be able to prevent data breaches, malicious activity identified and analyzed. Then you've got this new thing here. A lot of this looks, to me, sometimes like very simple security stuff. You've got security techniques, you've got alerts, monitors, and tools. So you're looking at setting up alerts and tuning alerts and things like that. Then they're looking at vulnerability management. Well, vulnerability management in 601 was quite large. And what they've got there is the implications of proper hardware and software. So you're looking at things like, I'm going to put a new device on the network. What do I do? first of all, I change the default settings. If I've got a device on the network and the default settings are set, what is my next thing? The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to patch it, because you could have bought like a security camera for Best Buy. It could have been on the shelf for about 6 months. And the first thing you need to do is then patch it. And then the next thing you're looking at, if it's not the default setting, if it's patched, once I patch it, I'm going to rescan it, because I want to make sure that that patch has actually worked. And then you've got data asset management, identity and access management. It's very, very huge. It's a large chunk, but it's very simple as well. And then they've brought in something new, the importance of automation and orchestration. And then chapter 21 in my book is incident response activities. And this has always been heavily tested. And then you've got security program management and oversight. So what I think they've done to 601, they've taken about 20% of the technical information out of 601, and they've put about 25 to 30% more information in 701. Because if you look at my 601 book, my 701 book, my 701 book's 150 pages more. But what they're bringing in, they're bringing in security governance. They've always had risk management. They're looking at audits and assessments. What type of audit do I need for these things? They're looking at security awareness practices and security awareness training. And then they're looking at the elements of effective security compliance. And this chapter here is all quite new. But if you've got my book, it's chapter 20 onwards. The hard work in my book is getting up to chapter 18. The stuff after that is very, very simple, I think. And then what you've got here, you've got 28 exam objectives. And they're trying to emphasize the latest trends and threats, attacks, vulnerabilities. Now, what they're doing, you may have the same topic in 601 as 701, but in 701, it could be measured differently. They've got things like automation, zero trust, the cloud environment. The cloud environment was in 601. But the hardest thing about 701 is learning all the material. And that's where people that try to take shortcuts are going to get caught. But if you know all your material, you've got a good chance of passing this test. Now, when I was teaching 601, I could concentrate on 5 different areas and get you certified. In 701, they test the nitty-gritty information, so you need to know all of your information. Now, 20% updated objectives, but what you need a guide that covers all the objectives. It's not a study guide or cut and paste. Practice tests, mock exams, flashcards, and exam tips. And if anybody's actually bought my book, there's 28 exam objectives, and I've covered each objective in a separate chapter. Now, tonight, someone asked for protocols, and I'm going to go over, first of all, in this study guide, protocols, but I would like you guys that are attending today to message me in LinkedIn and tell me specific topics that you're struggling with. Do you understand things like containers, or do you want to do things? Because this session here will be about an hour, but what I would like in my study group is to teach 3 or 4 smaller topics for maybe 15 or 20 minutes later. And at the end of it, I'll give you some questions and answers. Jeffrey, how does that sound? Does that sound better?
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
A little more structured.
Yeah. So what we're going to do, we're looking first of all at the three-way handshake. And what happens with the three-way handshake, this is TCP. Now, when you've got protocols, you've got TCP and UDP, and TCP is connection oriented. So A says to B, my next number's 5, and B says my next number's 8, and then they do an acknowledgement. So you get the three-way handshake, and when you set up Wireshark, you can see this three-way handshake happening because most of the protocols we're using are TCP based. Now, what we're going to do, we're going to look over some protocols, and I'm going to bring up my whiteboard to start with, because what you've got in the exam, you've got TCP protocols. My writing's normally better than this. What you've got TCP, and you've got about 27 protocols. And then what you've got UDP, which is connectionless, and you've got like 5 different protocols. But what you're trying to do is, if anybody's got my book, it's on chapter 18.
Hello.
Hello? Right, so if you're at chapter 18 in my book, I just need you to read from page 316 onwards, because what you're trying to get in the exam, I'm going to give you an unsecure scenario and you've got to pick something that's secure. Does that make sense? So what I'm going to do in this session, if it's black, it's going to be unsecure. If it's red, it's going to be secure. If I write a number like 25, that is going to be TCP. And if I write a number, UDP 69, you know that that is going to be TCP. Now, when you get books and that, you can look at books and you can see charts and you can see things. So what I want to try and do, I want to try and break things down to make them easier. I'm going to put them all into different areas. So for instance, I'm going to do file transfer, then I'm going to do email, and then I'm going to do Microsoft in that. And I'm going to put all of these things together so you can understand them. And then what I'm going to do, I'm going to focus maybe on taking in yellow the more important protocols that you're likely to see. How does that sound? So here we go. I'm going to be switching backwards and forwards between whiteboard stuff. Last year, I was teaching 150 vets, and some of them didn't have any IT knowledge at all. And I've wrote my book to help people. Now, file transfer, what does that mean? The client downloads files from a file server. That's what we're going to do. So I'm going to go into my whiteboard and I'm going to go for file transfer. So this is all going to be file transfer. And the most basic one is FTP. And he uses port 21. So you can see from the color that FTP is unsecure. And you can also see by the number is a TCP port and is known as passive. Now, if you were downloading files using an unsecure file transfer, someone might be able to get into those files. So what we're going to do, we're going to look for something that's secure. And what we've got is we've got secure file transfer protocol, and he uses port 22, and he is actually secure. And then what you've got trivial file transfer protocol, and it uses UDP 69. And because it's using UDP 69, it's much faster. So if I was going to re-image computers in a training room, that's what I would actually physically use. But then they've got something that's very strange. File transfer protocol secure. And you say to yourself, well, you've already got one that's secure. But what they've got 989 and 990. Now, if I had a barrel and I was filling it up with water with one hose, then I took another hose and I filled it up. With the two hoses, I could fill the barrel up much, much faster. And this is what it's doing. It's using 989 and 990. And you're going to use it for transferring large files. Now, the other thing about it is, what's the difference between copying and files? And this one here is going to copy to Unix or to Linux. And that is going to be a secure copy protocol. It uses port 22, and it's going to go to Unix or to Linux. How does that sound? Is everybody happy with the file transfer protocol? It's just for transferring files. At the moment, the exam, I don't think is testing it very, very much. But the thing about it is you've got to know all of these protocols. So let's go out the whiteboard, back into the slides, and I'll show you how my slides are operating. So file transfer protocol, you're transferring files. On the left-hand side are FTP port 21 and UDP, TFTP, UDP 69. And these are actually unsecure. But you've got SFTP port 22 and FTPS using ports 989 to 990. Now, the strange thing about this, you've then got secure copy protocol 22 copy to Linux. You'll notice there's two of them using the same channel or same port. Now, what is a port? A port is like a TV channel. So if I do news on channel 1 and sport on channel 2, if I want to do sport, I've got to go on channel 22. So these are using ports, which are TV channels. Now, the strange thing about it, someone asked me earlier today about ports and that. And at the moment, if you're going to learn this particular chapter for the exam, you're more interested in actually the protocol and what the protocol does. Now, let me just show you something else. If I go to the internet and I pick up security plus dot training, you'll see here's one of my websites over here. And if I go into here, I've got flashcards and I've got a ports quiz. Now, I would not bother when I'm studying, learn the port numbers. I would learn the protocols and what the function the protocol does. Because what the exam's going to say to you, here is an unsecure environment. Tell me which protocol is going to make it secure. Does that make sense? But if you spend 20 minutes on this, what does NFP use? You know what I mean? What does TLS use? You can see there that if you use these, there's 27 or 30 or something like this, 30 altogether. The flashcards here are quite good at learning your ports. So I would not bother with this at all. I would be more interested in what job do they do, these transfer files. Now I'm going to go on to the next thing, and the next thing we're all aware of, and that is email. We're going to look at the types of email protocols. We've got email going between servers. We've got mail clients that pull the email. Now, at this stage, I want to apologize to everybody because CompTIA is still in the dark ages. They don't even measure in their syllabus webmail, which makes it a bit strange. So I'm going to bring up my whiteboard and we're going to go for email. And what I'm going to do here is we're going to go email. So the first thing I've got over here, I've got a mail server and his name is mail1. And I've got another mail server and his name is mail2. Now they use a protocol called SMTP port 25. It's simple mail transfer protocol, but it tells you what it's doing on the tin. Send mail to people. But you know yourself now, in the exam, we need to actually look for a secure version. So we go SMTPS, and it's using 587 as its port number. Now, this is the very first version of Security Plus that used that, because in 501.601, they were using TLS. Now, what you've then got, I've got mail going between mail servers, but what I now need, I need the mail to come to the mail client. At the moment, they're using two mail clients. One's called Post Office Protocol 3, and the other one is using IMAP. Now, POP3 is a really ancient mail protocol. Back in 1982, when I was using email, my provider was called FreeServe, and I would sync my mail so that I pulled my mail from the mail server. So what you're doing, you're pulling this mail. Now, one thing you've got to remember is there's no copy on the server. So when you're using POP3 and you download it, if you delete it, you've got to ask for another copy of it. Now, if you take 3 and you put it into binary, 1, 2, 4, it's 0, 1, 1. And if you reverse it, it gives you the port number for POP3. Now, if I go to IMAP4, if that was a number, it'd be a 1. And if that was a number, it'd be a 4. And 1 from 4 is 3. And that gives you the port number for IMAP4. Now, they don't want that. They want secure mail. And what they do, they call it secure POP, or they call it secure IMAP. And in the UK, when you go for emergency services, you go for 999. But it's not quite an emergency. So we get the last number has changed. Wouldn't it be great if POP3 was 993 and IMAP4 was 995? Well, somebody messed it up. That is 995 and that's 993. And the thing that I would remember with the mail, I would remember the secure mail ports or also the secure mail. Now, there's one more thing I'm missing off of here, and that is a protocol called push notification. And have you ever seen in your Outlook when it says to you, you have mail? Now, this is actually user friendly, and sometimes push notification can be set up on an alerting environment to tell the administrators when something has actually happened. How are we doing so far with the email side? Is everybody happy with the email? Now, let's come out the email, go back into the slide and see what we actually have got. So I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to come back into my slide. And you can see here, when I bring it up, SMTP is unsecure, so is POP3, so is IMAP. Remember, POP3, there's no copy in the server, but the secure mails, SMTPS, that does between mail server, and these two are clients that are being pulled down. Now, what we're going to do, I'm going to do one more, and then we're going to have a little 5-minute break just to get the concentration span going, and then we'll go again. So this is a very important thing, and it's remote administration, because remember, if you're going to remote in to a system, you need to know what you're doing. And the thing about it, remote admin. Now, when I see in remote admin, I think of it as being internal. So over here, I've got a remote server. And what I've got here, I've got an old-fashioned protocol, and his name is Telnet. And Telnet is actually using port 23. But when he's remoting in, it's in clear text. So what happens here, if it's in clear text, we can capture the password. Now, nowadays, with all the cybercrime and using Wireshark and things like that, that would be very, very simple. So what we need to do, we need to have a secure version. And this is going to be Secure Shell. He's known to his friends as SSH, and he's using port 22. And here we go here, and this guy is secure. Now, he is your 5-star. If you're going to remote into network devices or routers or switches or anything, SSH is the man you want. Now, most of these things are command line, but this guy here has also got a GUI version. But there's also another one, and that's called remote. In fact, I need to change the color. It's called remote desktop protocol. And he is known as RDP, and he uses a port 3389. However, he's Microsoft. And the reason why SSH is so good is the Microsoft one, you need a Windows server or a Windows desktop. Because remember, when you're in either Windows 10 or the server environment, you need to enable access for remote desktop protocol. So what he's doing is remoting into Windows only. How does that sound? So really, if you're in an exam and you need to do remote administration, the thing you need to do is you need to use SSH, because he goes to network devices where remote desktop protocol, he doesn't actually physically do that. So is everybody quite happy with remote administration? There's only one tool you really can use, and that is going to be the SSH. How's that, Jeffrey?
That
So,
sounds good. Can you use SSH on a Windows machine?
oh yeah, you'd be able to
Okay.
SSH into that, yeah. So, Telnet is unsecure, passwords in clear text. A lot of the times in the exam, the examiner will say to you, you're remoting into a network device, somebody's stealing your password. So you need to know at that stage it's Telnet. Or he'll give you a scenario. Someone's remoting in, somebody's capturing your password, but you need to now give me a more secure environment. And that's when you pick SSH up. Does that make sense? Because they're going to test you in remote administration. Now, another thing to think about, if you've got a firewall rule coming from the internet, you do not want SSH enabled. You want to block SSH coming from the internet, because your remote administration in the CompTIA exam should only really be used internally. How does that sound? Now, what time have we got at the moment? We've got 20:55 for me. Let's come back at 2100, a little 5-minute break, so that I don't just bombard you with information. How's that? So we're going to go for a break, and we're going to be back in 5 minutes. Okay, guys? Okay, testing, 1, 2, 3. How are we doing? Right, what I'm going to do now is we're going to look at something else. The first thing I'm going to look at is I'm going to look at web traffic. So let's look at web traffic. And we have got an unsecured protocol called HTTP. And he uses port 80. And he's used by a web browser. Now, there's also quite a few secure ones. So normally, when you go to Amazon and you're going to buy something, and then it says, I'm going to take you to a secure server, it transfers you to HTTPS that uses 443. And this is secure web browser. Normally, card payment. Now, one of the things they actually ask you in the exam is a thing called data in transit. Now, to me, data in transit is data either going through a web browser or moving down a VPN session. And they are using transport layer security, which is 443 for data in transit. This is transport layer security. The old version, I'll call it legacy. The legacy version was called secure socket layer. And we know him as being called SSL. And he also uses 443. But if you're going to look at data in transit, the one you want to use is this one here, TLS, because he is actually more modern. And all three of these bottom ones, they all use the same port number, which is a bit strange. Now, the next thing I'm going to look at, I'm going to look at Microsoft products. So let's give this Microsoft. And the first thing you've got is lightweight directory access protocol. And to his friends, he's actually known as LDAP. Now, Microsoft have got a database and it's called Active Directory. And Active Directory has got the user accounts. And LDAP uses port 389. But remember, Because he's black in color, he's not secure. So what we need to do is bring up LDAP Secure 636 because he is actually secure management. How does that sound? Now, the next one we're going to look at is Kerberos. Kerberos that uses port 88, as they say in the bingo call, two fat ladies 88. He is actually authentication. And if the authentication fails, there's going to be time. It must be within 5 minutes of the domain controller. And this is a nice fact to remember. If my Kerberos authentication is failing, I need to look at time. On the next slide, we'll look and see what we can do with that. Now, the next thing we're going to look at is file and print services. Now, this is Microsoft File and Print Services, and you cannot disable it because if File and Print Services is not working, you won't be able to print or access any of your resources. Now, NetBIOS is the legacy version. And he uses ports 137 to 139. I think in 701 he's using 139, where 601, 501, he was using 137. But here's the man of the moment. Server message block traffic. And this is the more modern one. And he is known as SMB, and he's using port 445, two more than that. But remember, these are internal only. You would not open a firewall for anything with these two. So you've got SSH, NetBIOS, server message block. You do not want an incoming port on a firewall. You would block that because all of those are actually internal. And this one here is a good one to remember because he's the most modern version. You cannot disable them, but you can replace NetBIOS with them. So what we're going to do now, I'm going to look at that Kerberos when the authentication fails. Let's draw a diagram of it failing, and I'm going to show you a solution for it, and it's another protocol. Is everybody happy with that? So over here, I've got an Active Directory domain controller. Down here, I've got a guy called Fred, and he is going to log in. But when he passes his credentials, the login fails. Now, because the login's failed, we find out the domain controller, its clock time is 900, and this one is 850. Remember, it must be plus or minus 5 minutes. So we're going to bring another protocol up here called the Network Time Protocol. He is known as NTP. He uses ports 1, 2, 3. So what he does, he syncs time. He's looking, first of all, at the domain controller's time. Now he goes down and he changes the clock time on here to be the same. And when that happens, as long as the person's credentials are okay, he can log in. Has anybody heard of an NTP server? The other server that needs it is SIEM. Because remember, SIEM is correlating logs and events with multiple servers. So the network time protocol is used by SIEM to sync the time. How are we doing? Okay, please take a picture. Normally, this is going to be on YouTube anyway. Right, we're going to look at another thing. I want now to monitor the status and reports of network devices. Now, if you've ever seen an ops room, they've got all of their routers and switches all set up like this. And because they can't see them, if it's green, it's good. If it's yellow, it's not that healthy. If it's purple, it's even unhealthy. And if it's red, it's dead. And we're using a protocol called Simple Network Management Protocol. And he is known as SNMP. And he uses UDP port 161, which is unusual. But there's also an SNMP version 2, and he's using UDP 161. The secure version is SNMP version 3, but also he's UDP 162. So how does this work? Each of these have got an agent on them. We'll just do A for agent. And what happens with SNMP, it sets up what's known as a trap. And once it hits a certain threshold, what's going to happen is it's going to actually send an alert back so that the team know that there's something wrong. How's that? And he is internal only as well. How are we doing so far, guys? The last one I want to touch today is a thing called DNS, Domain Name System. Now, I've got this thing here, Domain Name System. He is DNS and he uses port 53. But you've got a DNS server and another DNS server, and they're going to update each other. And they are going to use TCP 53, where if you've got a DNS server and you've got a client connecting to the DNS server, he's going to use UDP 53. Now, this is actually known as zone transfer. And this is known as name query. So the one with the T in it is TCP. The one with the U in it is UDP. If I'm going to set up a firewall rule, I'm going to use UDP 53 because a client would never use the zone transfer at all. How's that? Now, the most important thing for DNS is to understand DNS resolution and DNS poisoning. So let's go to the next one and let's go DNS name resolution. Here is PC1. On PC1, there's a thing here called the DNS cache. There's also a file in System32 called the host file. And then after that, there is the DNS server. However, our DNS server can only carry the DNS entries for ourselves. So if he goes www.bmw.com, he looks first of all inside the cache, it's empty. He looks at the host file, it's empty. He goes to his DNS server. Now, his DNS server will have to do a referral to the root, then to the .com, and then down to BMW, where they will give him the IP address of the web server. So www might be 1.1.1.1. So then what happens, he caches it inside here. So the next time, he goes straight to the cache and doesn't have to go through the referral process. Everybody happy with that? Now, what is the host file? If I've got a server over here and his name is Sneaky Beaky, and I only want 2 people to go to Sneaky Beaky, I will put an entry in their host file. It's like a filter. But what does the attacker know is always going to be true? When the person on the PC is going to go for name resolution, he's always going to go to the cache. So let's take the rest of this out and see what's going to happen. Now, the attacker, he's going to try and poison your DNS cache. Now, let's set up two servers. I'll clear this cache. I'll clear that. And I'm going to put a legitimate server up here. And its name is going to be web1. And its IP address is going to be 1.1. So when this guy here puts www.web1.com, it will actually publish web1 as a 1.1.1.1 inside here. Now, what the attacker will do is a clone of web1, but what he will do, it'll have a different IP address. So if the person goes in initially, he'll look up here and he'll go to the legitimate website. So this one here is legit. And this one here is now fake. Now, the person's fine at the moment until we do a thing called DNS poisoning. So what we do with DNS poison, we poison the cache and we've now changed it. So what's going to happen, it'll look up here and take them to the fake website. So what is DNS poisoning? It's nice and simple. It's going to redirect you from legitimate to a fake website. Now, we're only looking at protocols at the moment. To stop it, we're going to use a protocol called DNS. I'm going to put it in two colors, SEC. What does that sound like? DNS security. Does that make sense? How are we doing so far? Right, let's go back to some of my slides. And I want to look at the DNS resolution onwards. So here we go. This is very important because it's going to happen in your exam. So DNS resolution, Fred is in this PC and he goes www.ianneil501.com. He looks at the cache, he looks at the host, he looks at DNS. We get a referral all the way through and he's got Ian Neil 501 and it gets published in his cache. So here is the DNS cache with web1, but it's now been poisoned. So instead of going to the legitimate website 1.1, we're going to a fraudulent one. But you notice what's happening. It looks the same. So you might go on the Ferrari website and it's been poisoned. You get to fake Ferrari. And there's a sale. And you think, oh, I'll have that leather jacket since 50% off. As soon as you put your credit card in there, you can you're going to be attacked. How are we doing so far? Jeffrey, how's today going so far?
Going great.
Right. Here we go. Insecure DNS, TCP 53, UDP 53. Remember, if I'm going to secure the cache, I'm using DNSSEC. It's actually using TLS. Here we go. A company has recently delivered a presentation on the use of secure protocols and is testing the attendees' information being delivered. Match the insecure protocol on the left with the replacements on the right. What do we think? What do you think, Linda?
Okay, so B is correct.
HTTP,
Yeah,
yes,
you don't
it
have to
is.
move it. I guess POP3 would be IMAP. So that would be C, and then E
Oh,
secure.
no. POP3S is
S.
that's secure, so it's ruled out. Now, A is okay because Telnet gets replaced with SSH. Everybody happy with that? HTTP gets replaced with HTTPS. POP3 is secure, rule them out. That's unsecure mail, but it would need to be SMTPS. HTTP and that is incompatible. File transfer and email is incompatible. And G, file transfer protocol with the secure version. So we've got A, B, and G. Now, this is a question out in my book, and if you look at the back, I give you the correct answers. I tell you why they're correct, and I also give you an option to tell you why they're incorrect. How does that look? Now, let's look at another one. This is easy. Which of the following type of content is often blocked by a mail gateway? What do you think? A mail
This is
gateway.
definitely C.
Yeah, no, because which of the following type of content is often blocked by a mail gateway? You see it? Now, if it just says which of the following is blocked by a mail gateway, would have B and C. But what you've got to watch, what type of content? B, email containing sensitive personal information. Do you see that? So with the CompTIA, you've got to watch yourself. And I gave you that with the answer. Now, this is me finished for the day. If you've got my book, great. If you've not, I think it's a good thing for you to actually get. And I'm not just saying that because it's my book. In March and April, 12 students passed with those scores. My book is designed, there's 28 exam objectives, and chapter 1's objective 1.1, chapter 2's the second one, up to chapter 28, which is the last objective. So you actually know if you're okay with that exam objective, if you're okay with this exam objective. There's 280 end of exam multiple choice, just like those. There's now, this is an old slide, there's 3 75 question online exams. There's flashcards, exam tips, and you get a discount over there. And I'd like to thank you guys for turning up, because a few people that said they were going to turn up just haven't turned up at all.